having the cloud power available to us and having that available as software as a service or platform as a service has really enabled smaller companies to be able to break into that market and use those services to optimize the routes for their deliveries.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Engati CX today. And I'm your host, Rahul, and today you folks are in for a treat. So we've got an artificial intelligence expert with us today on the show, and who you ask, it's Jim Barnebee to our interview series. So welcome, Jim. Let's begin with just a quick introduction of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform available across 14 channels with 30,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, the video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 300,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest, Jim Barnebee, a technically sophisticated IT professional, is the current Vice President of AI and Infrastructure at GetSwift. With an incredible track record of over 15 plus years in innovation and success, he heads many departments within the organization such as infrastructure, AI, development, data services, and QA. His broad knowledge has led to success in a variety of market sectors, including healthcare, retail, financial services, security, and telecommunications, and has helped these industries in creating a multi-cloud, multi-region, worldwide, near real-time delivery and logistic platform. So welcome to the show, Jim. Such an honor to have you.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. So I'm just going to straight up jump into the first question. I hope you're ready for that.
Ready to go.
All right. So, Jim, very curious to know, how has AI revolutionized the logistic industry? Like, what is its impact on delivery logistics?
Well, I can say that, first of all, delivery logistics is a huge chain of different pieces. And I would say that AI has revolutionized almost every piece of the delivery logistics chain.
Right.
The central points of the delivery logistics chain or the pieces that incur the most cost, the first and last mile of delivery logistics, which account for about half of the cost of a delivery logistics supply chain, are the pieces which have garnered the most attention for AI. And that's where most companies are concentrating most of their efforts. And that's pretty much become the table stakes for companies that are starting into the AI, are starting to put AI into their companies. About 80% from a survey I recently read, was that about 80% of companies expect big data or AI to become a core competency in their supply chain organizations going forward. So it's become a pretty prevalent thing in the industry to expect that to happen. As far as how it's impacted it, for something like across all the spaces, so whether it's a retailer or a first mile delivery company or a last mile delivery company, or even a back office company that deals with delivery logistics, we've seen AI impact every aspect of their operations. If you're dealing with something like a first mile company, think of the inventory, the warehouse, the fulfillment, shipping, dispatch, tracking, routing, notification, all of those pieces will have an AI component that will be applied. And of course, there'll be different types of artificial intelligence that can be applied to each of those, but the ROI on each of those is applicable and each one builds on the other. In last mile, you'll have the same type of additive construction while you apply the AI to each of the pieces.
That's right. And I think this is picked up really fast after the pandemic had started, right? I mean, there's less of human intervention, and I think AI has just like, the curve has been very steep upwards also. And that's what we see with a lot of companies.
Well, we've definitely seen some uptick with the pandemic, particularly in the areas of robotics, of no contact delivery and last mile. In first mile, we haven't seen as much because a lot of that was already moving towards robotic integration and optimization in the fulfillment and inventory and warehouse categories. So that hasn't seen as much of an uptick, although there has been some. If you look at warehouse integrations, particularly, those have made some strides. But if you look at last mile integrations, particularly in the delivery space, we're seeing more startups come out of that space and more efforts to work with contactless delivery and more optimizations in the AI space in that regard.
Right, right. So, Jim, what would you say are some, examples of groundbreaking updates and modifications which have taken place in the logistics industry due to the AI? Which are the most groundbreaking ones, do you think?
Well, we've obviously seen extreme optimizations in the vehicle routing problem, which is an extension of traveling salesmen. So for those not familiar with that, what you have is when you are going from point to point to point to point to deliver things. That's a well-known mathematical problem, been around forever. Vehicle routing is an extension of that, where you may not know each place you're going to stop, and you may not know what the conditions are between those places. So it's constantly having to be recalculated. That takes an immense amount of computing power. So having the cloud power available to us and having that available as software as a service or platform as a service has really enabled smaller companies to be able to break into that market and use those services to optimize the routes for their deliveries. So having a platform as a service that they can utilize, or a software as a service they can utilize to optimize that routing for them has really enabled them to get into that game. We've also seen robotics automation be optimized. So warehouse, autonomous drones, self-driving vehicles, those have all made great strides. And those have been pushed by the logistics industry because obviously you want to increase the margins on those. Load optimization and shipping optimization. So one of the things that's been really impacted is if you look at things like spot loading for delivery trucking and shipping optimization for international shipping and how you do that on container ships, recommendation engines have also seen a lot of optimization for AI. So that's on the retail side and the customer side. So if you look at any point on a supply chain, you'll find that AI has actually been impacted and optimized because of what we're seeing in this logistics industry push.
That's correct. I think it has a widespread reach, and it has affected almost every sector of this. And talking about things what AI has affected, I would like to know, Jim, how can AI and automation help companies in achieving the objectives efficiently and effectively? And do you think the shift to cloud, as you were mentioning before, is driving this change as well?
Well, I think the first thing a company needs to look at is obviously ROI. So when a company is either, first mile logistics or last mile logistics, whatever their specialization is, they need to look at what their ROI is going to be for that particular set of services that they render. For instance, a last mile logistics company. Generally, the table stakes for that type of thing are going to be in your order, delivery, tracking, route optimization, notification areas. Right? That's generally where companies are concentrating that because that's where they're going to get the biggest ROI. So then a company will look at that and say, okay, this is where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. So do we do that in-house, or do we get a software as a service, or do we get a platform as a service? And that's a management decision, just looking at what is the most cost-efficient way to do that. And very often that's getting outside resources, because one of the things that people are not aware of, and this happens in a lot in business cases, is that artificial intelligence is not a single thing. It is not a single umbrella. Right. It is actually a wide range of different skill sets. And within those different skill sets, there are different things that you can do. So one of the things that I like to talk to people about when I'm speaking to non-technical audiences about the specific technical techniques that are artificial intelligence is that if you have something like a chatbot system, like your company specializes in, then there are things like speech to text, text to speech, intent recognition, right? Those are chatbot specializations for natural language processing. If you have an expertise in that area, that is not going to allow you to build image recognition in neural networks, right? It's just not going to do that. It's not going to allow you to build targeted marketing or market prediction. It's not going to allow you to build robotics to do sorting and moving inside a warehouse. It's not going to let you do self-driving automation for fuzzy logic systems or legal processing paperwork for expert systems. Those are all completely different AI specializations that require not a very different skill set. And so when companies look at how they're going to integrate artificial intelligence into their systems, they need to go out and find individual experts for each one of those areas, which is obviously usually cost prohibitive, or find a platform or a service that can integrate those areas for them. And so that's usually the way that a company can get the best ROI. So when you talk about how a company can achieve their objectives efficiently and effectively, if they are not a large company that wants to invest in bringing all of that in-house and growing that expertise as a business offering themselves, then usually the best way they can get in the game quickly is to use a SaaS or PaaS platform. Is the shift to cloud driving this? Absolutely, because all of these areas require a vast amount of processing power. That's what makes AI work.
Right.
If you don't have this huge amount of processing power, you can't get anything done, because that's how AI works, is it takes a vast amount of data and it chomps on it until it can arrive at a probabilistic conclusion. And one thing people should also be aware of about AI is it's not perfect. It's not going to give you an absolute answer. It's going to give you a best guess. And that's what it's for. This is what's absolutely true. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to point you in the right direction and tell you things you didn't know before. It will give you very, very close to exactly what you need, but never expect it to be absolutely perfect, because that's not what it's designed to do. So those are caveats that people need to be aware of when they move into this space. Cloud gives us the capability to utilize the computing power we need to run those algorithms in order to produce that information so that people can use it to make intelligent decisions. And that's what we use AI for in the different areas where it's applied.
Right, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more to the fact that AI is like a huge umbrella. There are different aspects to it, and yep, I totally agree with that. But let's get the conversation back to where this started and with the pandemic situation. And this has been a pressing question in everybody's mind that, with the ongoing pandemic and social distancing norms in place, do you feel companies are more inclined to adopt AI now more than ever?
I think there's two different ways that companies are approaching AI in the pandemic. There are companies that are have aggressive versus conservative profiles in how they're approaching AI. Mm-hmm. Some companies are paring back and saying they don't want to risk anything in the current climate. So they're paring back their projects, and they're paring back their expenses, and they're paring back their efforts on just anything they want to risk in the current pandemic due to risk.
Right.
And that's something that everyone feels. Mm-hmm. And then there are companies that say, no, what we want to do is actually differentiate in this market. We want to provide new services, new features, and new capabilities in the market to differentiate ourselves from other companies in order to try and grab market share.
Right.
So, and that's a matter of how does the company see itself? How does the company want to market itself? And I think that's, again, a question for the corporate management to look at and say, okay, if we're going to pursue this AI project, what is our expected ROI? And sometimes you can't know that. Sometimes if you're looking at something like an unstructured learning program, right? If you're looking at, for example, something like structured discovery or targeted marketing with clustering, you don't know what you're actually going to get out of that as an ROI. So then it's a risk. And the corporate management has to decide, do we want to take that risk and put this money out there and maybe not get a good ROI out of it in this pandemic climate? So those are decisions that corporate management has to make. Do we want to make the risk and possibly get a really big, corporate differentiator in the market and see big revenue growth out of it? Or do we want to be conservative with that and not take the risk and then not see it? If they can actually quantify the ROI and say, oh, okay, we're going to put these into our, let's say, basic supply chain with a PaaS platform, and we can say, hey, that's going to give us, a minimum 15% ROI over the course of the next 6 months, great. That's a fairly straightforward business decision. But most of the time, you can't quantify it that precisely. So then it's a matter of how much risk does the company want to take on in this environment.
Right. Absolutely. That was fantastically answered also. Well, like concluding with the interview, I think this chat was great and a lot of insights from your side. Jim, is there any other idea or soundbite you would like to leave our audience with today?
A few. So we talked about the different types of AI and the different pieces of AI. Mm-hmm. So a couple of quick things. First of all, there's a lot of confusion about AI. AI is never a magic bullet. You're never going to get, nobody's ever going to come in and say, this will solve all your problems. And if they do, run, because that's bad. AI will never solve all your problems. It's not going to happen. What it can do is help you understand and find answers to specific problems and make specific things better. That's what it's for. And that's because we don't have anything like a general AI. There is no Skynet. There is no Colossus. There's no Terminator. We don't have that. We don't have some big thing in the sky that's going to be your buddy. What we have are specific things that help solve specific problems, and that's what they're for. Now, can this be used for bad things? Sure. I mean, we can have systems that, go out and tell you everybody you've ever talked to and find all of your friends and on Facebook and social media and connect them all together. And, there have been social tracing programs like that for years. They're actually kind of interesting. But there's also good sides to that. Can you use it to use a recommendation engine and tell you what you might want to shop for on Amazon that your friends like, or what music they like that you might like? So there's a good side and a bad side to all of those things. International cooperation is good when it allows you to talk to people in another country by instantly translating the language. It can be a downside when that same language translation leads to conflict. So it's a tool, depending upon how we use it, how well we use it, and how well we understand it. It can be either very good or bad, or we just have to be careful with what we do.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It's like that's a very beautiful message put there. Then at the end of the day, it's in our hands, how you want to take it. Correct. And thank you so much, Jim, for giving us your time. And your insights were really valuable, and I know our audience is really going to enjoy this interview.
Well, I thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me this morning.
Appreciate that. And we'll be back with another episode for Engati CX with another expert. So stay tuned and we'll see you on for the next one. Thank you, Jim.